All right, let's talk about one of the biggest decisions you'll make as a developer, Kubernetes or serverless. It's a real fork in the road, and honestly, picking the wrong path can lead to some massive headaches down the line. So let's dive in and figure out how to get this right.
So this is the big question, right? Kubernetes versus serverless. And look, the first thing you got to know is that this isn't about which one is better overall. That's the wrong way to think about it. It's all about which one is the perfect fit for your specific project. So to even start answering that, we need to be on the same page about what these two powerhouses actually are.
Okay, first up, Kubernetes. The best way to think about it? It's like the conductor of a massive, complex orchestra. And in this orchestra, the musicians are your containers. Kubernetes handles all the grunt work, the deployment, the scaling, making sure traffic goes to the right place, even healing itself when something goes wrong. The bottom line is, it gives you an insane amount of fine-grained control over every little piece of your infrastructure.
Then you've got serverless. And yeah, the name is kind of funny because, of course, there are still servers. The whole point is, you don't have to think about them. The cloud provider, like AWS or Google Cloud, they manage everything. You just focus on writing your code, and it magically runs whenever an event happens. And the best part? You only pay for the split seconds your code is actually running, not a penny more.
All right, so theory's great and all, but let's be real. The best lessons come from the trenches, right? Especially from the mistakes people make. So now we're going to dive into a couple of real-world stories from a DevOps engineer who learned all this stuff the hard way, so you don't have to.
So, mistake number 1. This is a classic, I'm sure we've all seen it. A team gets swept up in the hype. They were building a pretty straightforward internal tool, a simple web app, a couple APIs, nothing crazy. But Kubernetes was the hot new thing, it was cool, everyone was talking about it. So of course, they decided they had to use it. And well, this quote from Bravin Wasike pretty much says it all. The setup dragged on for weeks longer than it needed to. They were stuck in the weeds, messing with YAML manifests, ingress rules, the whole shebang. And for what? For a simple app. In the end, they created this massively over-engineered solution, and the client was just left scratching their head like, why was this so complicated?
So what's the lesson here? It's so important. Just because a tool is powerful doesn't mean it's the right tool for every job. Kubernetes is an absolute beast, which is great when you need it, but for a simple app, it's like bringing a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It's just overkill. The takeaway is simple but crucial. You have to match the tool to the complexity of the job, always.
Okay, on to mistake number 2. And this one comes from the complete opposite end of the spectrum. This time, the team had a project to build an API that processed files as they were uploaded. And on paper, serverless looked like a slam dunk. I mean, it scales automatically, it handles bursts of traffic. What could possibly go wrong, right?
Famous last words. What went wrong was something called a cold start. Here's how it works. To save you money, serverless platforms basically put your code to sleep when it's not being used. When a new request comes in, it has to wake up, and that takes a moment. It's usually super fast, but for this file processing API, that tiny delay was just enough to create a noticeable lag. And as this quote tells us, that lag led directly to delayed processing and, you guessed it, unhappy clients.
And here's the big lesson. Serverless is amazing, but it's not a magic bullet. It's not always set it and forget it. That little bit of latency from a cold start can be an absolute deal breaker for any application that needs to be snappy and responsive all the time. Sometimes, if you need that consistent, rock-solid performance, you just have to accept the higher overhead of an always-on solution like Kubernetes.
Okay, so we've heard the war stories, we've seen the pitfalls. Now let's take all that hard-won wisdom and build it into a framework, something structured that you can actually use to make the right call every single time.
Let's break it down with this table. It really shows the core trade-offs. With Kubernetes, you get ultimate control. You can tweak everything. But the price you pay is a slower setup, and you're paying for those servers even when they're just sitting there, idle. Now, with serverless, you get insane development speed, and you only pay for what you use. But you give up a ton of control, and you're kind of stuck with one cloud provider. See? It's a classic balancing act.
So with that framework in our back pocket, let's get tactical. Let's build a playbook. When exactly should you reach for one over the other?
You're going to want to go with Kubernetes when you're dealing with really complex microservice architectures. Lots of little services that all need to talk to each other reliably. It's also your go-to if portability is a big deal. If you want to avoid being locked into one cloud provider and maybe run on-prem too, Kubernetes is the undisputed champ. And finally, if you have stateful workloads, think databases that absolutely cannot lose data, Kubernetes has features built specifically for that.
Okay,
And when should you choose serverless? Well, if speed to market is your #1 goal, it's a no-brainer. For things like MVPs or quick prototypes, you can get something up and running incredibly fast. It's also the king of spiky, unpredictable workloads. Imagine a Black Friday sale. You go from 0 to 1,000,000 users in an hour. Serverless handles that automatically, without you breaking a sweat. And lastly, if you're building an event-driven system where things happen in response to other things, like a file upload or a new message in a queue, that is the absolute sweet spot for serverless.
But wait, there's more. Here's where we get into the really interesting pro-level thinking. Because the choice isn't always a binary this or that. The most powerful, most efficient architectures, they often find a way to use both. This is the hybrid approach, and it's all about getting the best of both worlds. Think about it. You could run your front end on serverless, super cheap and scales perfectly, while your complex stateful backend runs on Kubernetes for maximum control. Or, how about this? Use a simple serverless function for a periodic job, like backing up your database every night. Easy. You can also use serverless to ingest a fire hose of data, and then hand it off to a powerful Kubernetes cluster for the heavy-duty processing. You can even run serverless frameworks on top of Kubernetes itself, which gives your developers that simple, fast experience while you still keep all the control underneath. It's brilliant.
So if there's one thing you walk away with today, let it be this. This whole debate, it's not about picking a winner. It's not a competition. It is all about alignment. It's about looking at your specific project, understanding those trade-offs we talked about, control versus speed, cost versus flexibility, and then, and only then, making a smart, informed choice.
So I want to leave you with a different question to ask yourself. Stop asking which one is better and start asking, how can these two amazing tools work together to make my project incredible? That subtle shift in mindset, that's what separates good architecture from great architecture.